So, Professor, I want to start by exploring your principal theory. You've argued that modern capitalism cannot function without nationalism. In other words, that the nation state isn't just historical, but structural. Can we start by having you explain that framework for our audience and how it has shaped your worldview?
Well, in the first place, I would like to correct you. It's not just modern capitalism. Capitalism by itself is modern, but it refers to all capitalism since its arrival in, let's say, 16th or 17th centuries. It has been clearly associated with nationalism. There is a structural problem with capitalism for which it requires some kind of intervention, which I believe is to be found in nationalism. The structural problem with capitalism is that it has kind of self-destructive mechanism which is built into the very structure of the system. This mechanism is about creating an ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor. Capitalism is created in such a way as to promote a divisive social order in which the rich always gain more and the poor are getting poorer. It is something which is simply a structural necessity, I would say so. In order to overcome this problem, which makes the entire system, well, let's say, not really self-sustainable. It is something which denies sustainability to the very system, because if you have an ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor, eventually you get some form of uprising among the poor, some form of instability. It becomes socially unsustainable. And for that purpose, to overcome this unsustainability, capitalism needs something which you have already mentioned, needs some kind of social glue. This social glue is to be found in nationalism. Nationalism is an ideology which promotes the idea of equality of all the citizens, despite the fact that some of them belong to the class of the rich and others to the class of the poor. But the very ideology of nationalism promotes the idea that they are all equal, that they all belong to the same group, that they all share the same interests, that they belong to the same nation. And it's a kind of social glue that actually creates an illusion among the masses that they have no division between those at the top and themselves at the bottom, that they all share indeed same interests and that they can normally live together within a single unit labeled as the nation, that this nation is the bearer of sovereignty, that they are all bearers of sovereignty, that it is not simply granted to those at the top, that it belongs to all of them, and that as such the nation has the right to constitute its own state. Moreover, I used to define the nation on several occasions, but I will particularly promote it in one forthcoming article defining the nation through the Kantian lens. It's called like that. The nation is actually a social formation constituted and perpetuated by a myth of its inherent right to sovereignty. It means that this kind of social formation, in order to actually come into being, needs to claim sovereignty. So the myth that I was referring to is founding idea, but on the other hand, in order to actually come into existence, the nation needs to claim sovereignty. And this very belief into common sovereignty that belongs to all the citizens within a single nation is what constitutes a nation as such. And nationalism is an ideology that spreads this kind of belief among the population and especially among the potentially rebellious masses, and prevents them from actually coming into any kind of state of rebellion or uprising against the system, no matter how poor they may become due to this divisive economic system which permanently widens the gap between the rich and the poor.